Hello everybody and welcome to my touchscreen smart mirror capstone video. So this capstone project took me about the entire semester, from coding to physically building the frame and then updating the website, presenting, typing the paper, and creating and editing this video. So I really hope you enjoy it. I break down pretty much everything, and yeah, so let's get started. Okay, so we're going to start by physically taking my mirror apart to show you guys how I set it up. So we're going to flip this down and expose the back parts. Okay, so the first part, obviously you can see, is the wooden frame marked with top, bottom, right, and left, which we did when we measured the entire thing. Also, these L screw-in frames to keep each wooden plank together to hold the frame in place. Or sorry, the mirror and the monitor in place. So as you can see, this is an LG monitor that's just set in the base of the frame. And we can talk more about the wooden frame once I take everything out. So moving on to the back of the monitor, I have the Raspberry Pi fitted in its box and cut just like this. As you can see, that there's the power cable, the micro HDMI to macro converter that just plugs right back into the monitor, as well as everything else that's exposed in the SD card sitting right there. Just place that back in there, and everything here, so like this box, the Raspberry Pi box, is double-sided tape. So as you can see right there, that's what's supposed to be holding the Pi, with the little standoffs that I created for the Pi, and right underneath it is another piece of double-sided tape on all four corners of this box to hold it in place when the mirror is upright. Next, I have the power strip mounted over here with double-sided tape as well on the back, so that's not going anywhere. And I have the Raspberry Pi, the USB-C Raspberry Pi power adapter plugged in over here, as well as the monitor power cord plugged in on the power strip as well. Now, this power strip is surge protected. I made sure to get one just in case. And I also added the LED light strips all along the sides here and plugged that in over here. And as you can see, we kind of do have a little bit of an issue because this is bringing up the adhesive, because the tension from moving the power cord from the LED light strip over to the power strip is kind of pulling it. We also have another problem with this, and of course I could just get another USB power brick that's smaller, but I don't have one at the moment. So the problem I run with this is that sitting it close to a wall, it has to be at least this far out, because this stands out this far. Right. So I have all of that connected and plugged into the power strip, so that way when this is standing upright, this is all invisible to the eye, unless obviously you go behind it, and so that I can just tap this button and turn everything on all at once. So as you can hear, you heard the beep of the monitor, the lights lit up obviously, and down here you can see that the Pi has lit up. I also have right here, plugged right into the monitor, is an aux cord for audio that I plugged in all the way over here. I have it run out to the side, and I could of course get smaller, cheaper speakers to mount them also on the sides of the monitor like I did everything else. But for now and for this showcase, I have the aux cable running off to the side, and I plug my USB and power adapter enabled Beats Pill. And that is for the initial greeting when my mirror starts up, which you guys will see later. The only reason I couldn't plug it into the Raspberry Pi itself is because the Raspberry Pi is connected to the HDMI port in the monitor, and it wasn't outputting the audio correctly, so I just figured I'd bypass all that and steal the audio directly from the monitor, which ended up working. Anyway, so let me power this off, and I'm going to take the monitor out and show you the rest. So the next step is taking out the monitor. So since it's just placed in the wooden frame, it is placed in very tightly, so it is kind of tricky to get it out. But you're able to find leverage here and just lift the monitor directly out of the wooden frame. And then you're able to just lift this and you're left with the monitor. Now I'm gonna have to unplug the LED light strip, and that's where that tension was I was talking about earlier, and that's like ripping up the adhesive. That can be fixed with double-sided tape, but now the monitor is separated from the frame and the mirror itself. Right, so now we got the monitor out and set off to the side. You can see obviously the reflection. This is the double-sided mirror. As you can see down here, because of these like perforations in the mirror, this is where I cut along here to fit the mirror, not necessarily to the size of the monitor, but to sit in the wooden frame and have the edges kind of overlap over here. So I'm going to lift up the mirror here. As you can see, there it is. You can see right through it to the other side, but also reflect it. So I'm going to set this over here on the side. And now we are left with the IR frame. So this is the IR touch frame, and this is actually the only thing that's completely stuck to the wooden frame. So I used the double-sided tape that I used everything else on to put like the power strip on the back of the monitor. I used that to secure the IR frame to the wooden frame, just so because you can see the wooden frame comes up to here. So when we have this wooden frame tipped up, the IR frame's really the only thing that can't reach the sides to prevent it from sliding down. So if I lifted this up and it wasn't stuck to the wooden frame, it would just slide down and chill out here, which becomes a problem because then you're losing this much space up here, so then the top of it would be down here and it would just mess up the entire thing. So I opted to just double-side tape every part of this to keep it in place. And here you can see the difference in sizes from this side to this side of the wooden frame. And the reason that is because the dimensions of this IR frame is different. They're different from the dimensions of the monitor. And so this has to cover the entire area of the mirror. And unfortunately it doesn't. It actually, on this left side over here, the IR frame left about an inch of space on the monitor itself. So any kind of module or anything that I had on that side was either completely invisible or cut off by the IR frame. So in order to fix that, I moved software. In the software, I moved the modules over so that they would fit in just before that 1 inch cutoff. And then when we are building the frame physically, we wanted the front to look proportional. So we had to make adjustments to this to make this side bigger and this side smaller, and it ended up working. Also, because of these L frames and the way that we wanted the wood situated, we have these little triangle, right triangle cut out pieces to make the corners, but it also was super helpful down here because the IR frame needed to plug in directly to the pie. So it was super helpful when we could just run this USB cord from the IR frame out of here. So that means the mirror could sit here perfectly flush because this was pushed back into this corner. The monitor could sit perfectly flush because this was also pushed back into the corner. Right, so that is the frame physically. I will put this back up and kind of show you the proportionality of it from the right and left sides, right? So like there and there works because of the measurements we had on each side. Now placing everything back in the frame is really just as simple as taking it out. So I'm gonna reach over here, I'm gonna grab the two-way mirror, be careful not to kind of get fingerprints or scratch it. And I'm gonna set that right back into the wooden frame. For the monitor being placed back in, it's also pretty simple. So I just literally lift up the entire thing and place it right back in. See here, it's really tight into the monitor, or the wooden frame, which is what we want because we want it to stay without adhesive. So you do kind of have to push a little bit harder on this upper right hand corner, and see, as you can see, it slid right in, and now it's not going anywhere. Then we just plug everything that we need back into it. As you can see, we can plug the IR frame back into the Pi, like so. Maybe. There we go. So then the IR frame's connected to the Pi once again. And this was my attempt at cable management, hooking up these cords with rubber bands, and I have like zip ties and bread ties. So yeah, so then we'll just turn it back on, flip the wooden frame and everything back up, and here you can see the complete physical frame with little 2-cord runoff over here, and as you can see, it's starting up. So we will move on to what the startup looks like now. And this is what it looks like starting up.
Welcome back, Mr. Sanders.
And then the touchscreen part of it all is about that. Changes it into a regular mirror, just takes the other stuff away from it. There we go. And this is what it looks like with the lights on. Pretty cool. So unfortunately, after filming the startup sequence and everything on display, my SD card was corrupted. So for the sake of this video, I will be voicing over captures that I have taken of my project as it has progressed. So one thing I did forget to touch on when I was talking about the touch screen was the 3-bar menu select right next to the hiding the modules button tap. So as you can see from this capture, I tapped the 3-bar menu display, and it brings up this menu from the right side. So the first option on the top is shut down RPI, which is Raspberry Pi, and the option on the bottom is to restart the Raspberry Pi. So my intentions with this were when you on tap or on click the shutdown Raspberry Pi or restart Raspberry Pi, for the shutdown it would run the command sudo shutdown now in terminal, and restart would be sudo restart now, also in terminal. So that way the Pi was able to be shut down and restarted directly from the mirror's interface without having to go back to the desktop and run the commands themselves. So I also wanted to show you all the modules in full effect, and unfortunately I can't really do that as my SD card was corrupted. So here we are on my project website that documented everything that I did from the start until the very finish of my mirror, and some of the notable modules that I wanted to show you. Firstly, starting off with the Spotify module, and I'll throw a picture up as well where that's located on my mirror. So here are some of the commands that I ran here in terminal. This is just cloning from the GitHub repo and installing it, and this is what the code initiates and runs. This app where you authorize the client ID and client secret of your Spotify developer account. So after doing so, here you can see this is the JavaScript that I had to put in the config.js file of the MagicMirror. This is where all of the modules in all of their code go. So giving a rundown, the module always starts with the module name, as well as that in parentheses, always followed by a comma, and then the position, which was the top left, which I also showed in the picture previous. Next is the configuration code, configuration JavaScript code, which houses the client ID, client secret for this module, as well as the access token and refresh token. So when I would want to play music on my mirror, I'd have to do it from the either Safari or Chrome Spotify web browser player. I couldn't necessarily do it from the app because the mirror did have a hard time communicating with the app itself. So the next module I wanted to show you was the startup that you heard, the startup voice, and as well as the alert. So I had to install the module MMM sounds from GitHub. So I ran this code in the command terminal and cloned it from the GitHub and installed it. So then that module was input into the config.js file, just like the other one, with the name and that config. So the startup sound was welcome.wave, which is a sound that I did record by myself from my own kind of third-party software, and put that on my Pi and was able to track it down and link that to this module and the startup sound. Now the quiet time start and quiet time end, that is the period of time where I did not want my mirror to, if anything, for any reason went wrong or it restarted, for it to say welcome back Mr. Sanders at, say 2 a.m. and scare me. So I have that at quiet time at those kinds of times. So on top of the sound that I wanted to play, I also wanted an alert to play, visual alert. And the module alert was already housed in the MagicMirror config.js file. So all I had to do was initiate it. So I called the module alert in the config JavaScript code. I displayed the time for 5,000 milliseconds, and the welcome back message read, "Welcome back, Mr. Sanders," which is exactly what the welcome.wave said. As you can see here, here's a still image of what the alert visual alert notification looks like, and at the same time, as you saw in startup, the voice reads it aloud. So the next feature I wanted to add was my Google Calendar. So I went ahead and ran all of these things in terminal and was able to install that. And I had to also find my kind of client ID, just like I did for Spotify, and link that to my calendar. So then when I updated my Google Calendar on the browser or anything like on the app, it automatically pushed those things to the module itself. So here's the still image of that. It sits right below the date and time, which I wanted because I feel like that is exactly where it should be. So as you can see, these are my specific classes: supply chain, e-commerce, digital forensics, rounds, and art. And the times, and it also says when it ends if it's relatively close to those times. So the way I fixed the 1-inch barrier that the IR frame created was by moving everything within the CSS file of the MagicMirror. So as you can see here are all the prerequisites to download a module called MMM module position, which is a grid-like module that allowed me to move the modules visually rather than just constantly updating the code and then having to restart the mirror every time. So this module just let me move them around. So as you can see, here's the terminal, and this is what the visual representation on the mirror itself looks like. So when this code is running, I'm able to click and drag each individual module, and it will save the coordinates of these modules as a CSS file. As you can see here, this down here was the config, or the JavaScript code that I needed to put in the config.js to enable the module positions module to be present. After that, as I said before, it creates a CSS file for that specific module, which then you just copy and paste into the main CSS file for the MagicMirror. And finally, implementing the touchscreen capabilities was way easier than I thought it was going to be. The IR frame was luckily plug and play, so I could just plug it into the Pi and it was already ready to go. However, I needed to get the code set up to be able to have the Pi respond to it. So I ran some prerequisites and everything like that in the terminal, and I also included the JavaScript code. So it's obviously just called MMM Smart Touch, and I wanted it at the bottom center. At first, as you can see, I didn't end up sticking with that because the news module was going to be there. So I moved it to the bottom right. So that was the video showcasing my Capstone Smart Mirror. I hope you guys enjoyed. I really enjoyed this project. It kind of taught me not only more JavaScript, but also determination, and then the fact that my SD card did get corrupted. I was a little bummed out, but nonetheless, we persevered